Good morning again. I have to say that I really admire flying professors like Toja, coming from Boston yesterday, arriving Prague today. Not talking about the fact that she will probably be the most popular person of the day because she managed, without any bribing of the organizers, to expand our coffee break by 10 minutes. And I'm sure everybody will appreciate it. I will talk basically about some quite different features that I tend to connect with Abusir and Saqara and talk about different landscapes. They seem to pop up during our excavation activities in Abusir. So thus I will focus on Saqara and Abusir side for several reasons. First of all, talking about landscapes, I can see that there is every reason to think that there are different sorts of landscapes that display quite specific features such as natural features, political, social, economic, and symbolical or religious, if you wish. And more often than not, you can't separate clearly between them. So very often it's very difficult to say which aspect prevails. In the next few minutes, I would like to focus on three different sorts of analysis. It's inter-site relationships, intra-site relationships, and microcosm within individual entities in the cemeteries we will look at now. As you know, since 2003, when we provided means for QuickBird, which is digital globe, to fly over Abusir-Saqqara and Dashur, we all use these images because they provide, at least to my knowledge, still the highest resolution available for the pyramid fields, which is about 54 centimeters per pixel. So this is the 2003 image, which we commissioned directly from QuickBird satellite, digital globe, showing the 64 square kilometers scene, starting on the left with Abusir over here, Saqara in the center, and Dashur over here. So these are the three focal points on the pyramid fields very close to Memphis. All of them within a 5-kilometer walking distance from the assumed location of Memphis, which was located probably somewhere over here to the east of the pyramid complex of Djoser, North Saqara, medium-shaped or sort of plateau over here. That's why, I'm sorry to say it, Mark, we can't expect any significant pyramid city in this area in terms of a settlement that would provide workforce for building pyramids of Abusir, Saqara, or Dashur, because most of the people lived pretty close to the main settlement. So according to catchment analysis, anything up to 5 kilometers one way is acceptable to move the workforce there and back. I shall focus now on several physical properties of the Abusir and Saqara landscape, with a special attention paid to the Lake of Abusir over here, so pyramid field to the north, North Saqara here. One of the important issues to realize when working in this area is that you have to dismiss quite popular idea that the entrance was situated in the area from which we approach the site today, which is the Valley Temple of Unas, and this asphalt road leads up to the plateau somewhere in the area of the pyramid of Uzerkav and Teti. In the 3rd millennium BC, as we know from different evidence, the principal approach was provided by the Lake of Abusir, which was a seasonal body of water located directly to the north of the North Saqara plateau, which we have here. And here we have a more general view from the pyramids of Abusir over the Lake of Abusir here, North Saqara, and some pyramids of the 3rd, 5th, and 6th dynasty necropolis of central Saqara. The evidence shows that during the 3rd millennium BC in the area of Abusir and Saqara there existed three principal lakes that can be physically attested. Some of them were already sampled either by the Dashur team, by Nicole Alexanian, or by our team, who opened several trenches all over here along the western edge of the escarpment. And this is the assumed location of the old kingdom capital prior to the 6th dynasty, as we all know. This reconstruction is based mainly on the work of David Jeffers and his team, coring all around the edge of the plateau, and Ian Messias and his geophysical surveys over the past 20 years, I would say. This is one of the trenches which we opened in 2007. It's Trench A, which shows what we assume to be, or what we interpret to be, at least for the moment, a landing platform at a height of about 18 meters above sea level. It's still quite a very high location for, given the results of the Giza projects and the absolute levels above sea level. But still, what you can see here is a kind of a platform orientated in a southwest northeast direction with a flight of steps over here. I wonder if they are visible, maybe not. And what is also very illustrative is the section over here that shows quite interesting post-depositional factors that stepped in by the end of the 6th dynasty that basically confirm what we know from other sites about drying of the climate and some depositional factors. This local geomorphology influenced many entities in the area, including valley temples of some Abusir pyramids, Sahura and Nusra, who either had entrances orientated not only to the east but also to the south, respecting this particular location of the Lake of Abusir, which was the principal approach posed to Abusir, South Abusir, North and Central Saqara, including Djoser most likely. It's also shown on this 3 model based on the satellite image provided by the digital globe. Again, you can see the pyramid fields over here. Some entities that are still to be excavated or surveyed in the future is the location of the valley temples of the 5th dynasty kings, Lake of Abusir, South Abusir, on which we will focus in the second part of the talk, and some preliminary results kindly provided by Dr. Krejci. It's what we think was a huge harbor facility associated with the valley temple of Nusra over here. Mark Lehner was able, and Toja as well, were able to show quite interesting pictures, more than 100 years old by now. This is another contribution to this look back. Again, view of North Saqara plateau with a village siding on a small levee in the area. So this explains how the ancient Egyptians, even in the early 20th century, cope with particular features connected with seasonal floods, influencing not only the topography of Meidum and Giza, but also Abusir and Saqara at that time. This is something what we finished only a couple of weeks ago. It's a 3D contour plan, including not only a site of Abusir, but also central North Saqara. You have to believe me, but until recently there existed no 3D contour plan of the area, despite almost 200 years of excavation in the area. So this is, again, a quite feasible simplification of how the Lake of Abusir played a major role, providing major access routes both to the north and to the south. With Gisr el-Mudir here, complex of Djoser over here, North Saqara, you can see the highest levels all over here. And again, different view of the same 3D contour plan with the North Saqqara Plateau, where the history around 3000 BC of the site of Abusir and Saqara begins, and lowest locations over here. This area we call Wadi Abusiri. And as I will be able to show you, it played really a prominent role and influenced significantly even specific architectural features. Talking about site and landscape development, we can use not only 3D plans and architectural mapping, geophysics, satellite imaging, but also reliefs. John Byrne will talk about it later during the conference. What we know for sure is that during the time of New Sera, a new wave of climate depredation steps in. One of the indications are the reliefs featuring desert activities that we have attested from Meidum at the beginning of the 4th dynasty, and then they reappear during the time of New Sera and dominate the period of the late 5th, early 6th dynasties. This is quite a famous example from the Mastaba of Neankhnum and Khnumhotep, kindly provided by Yvonne Harper. And talking about the multidisciplinary approaches to landscapes, we can't, being Czechs in Abusir, skip our famous mental game with beetles, which we discovered years ago in 2 of the side shafts in the complex of Inti, dating to the 2nd half of the 6th dynasty. Excuse me. These shafts featured mummification deposits with broken red pottery, natron material, and some of the mummification vessels preserved, especially this deep bowl, remains of beetles that got stuck in the resin that was used during the mummification ritual. It took us 2 years to find a specialist who could interpret them specifically, but now we know that this species, we have more than 12 different species from South Abusir now, is quite characteristic of the climate depredation again, because beetles occupy very specific environmental niches, and this beetle witnesses one sheer fact, basically, that the desert was becoming really desert by the end of the 6th dynasty. So beetles are quite important for the climate reconstruction. It's just one small example. And here is a chart showing, based on the Palermo stone Nile flood heights, that shows again that there was a major trend showing depredation of the climate towards the end of the 6th dynasty. Dealing with cemeteries during the 3rd millennium BC, it's quite interesting to know that the cemeteries were given no name, so they were basically associated with the principal settlements they were associated with, they belonged to. There are very vague and ambiguous references to individual cemeteries in offering formulas, very general ones. We can also see quite clearly when dealing with 3rd millennium cemeteries that cemeteries were, among other things, major expressions of collective memory, status, and identity. To illustrate this aspect, I'm going to enter a more dangerous field, the late 4th, early 5th dynasty, and the question of visibility, intra-site visibility. You know that Egyptologists tend to play with the different lines and alignments. I'm not a particular friend of these mental games, but in some cases I have to admit that they work quite well. There is a clear concept of the alignment of the Giza pyramids. There is a clear concept of the alignment of the Abusir pyramids. And also, when you deal with political aspects of landscape and individual entities, we find across Abusir-Saqqara and Dashur, you come across Mastaba Pharaoh, which has a very weird siding in South Saqqara. It's the end of the 4th dynasty. The family is coming just back from Giza after the Giza intermezzo. So when you walk across these sides, you wonder why, and sometimes you get these views. So you can see that the Mastaba Pharaoh, which has a very specific shape, difficult to interpret historically, but coming from the Lake of Abusir, and I will get to the issue of visibility again, you can get these pictures, which are, again, we all are Egyptologists, so there is no need to elaborate them, but they are quite tempting, aren't they? Alignments. I said that I don't like to play particularly extensively with lines, but again, if you look at the location of the Mastaba Pharaoh and connect it with Snofru, you get a location for Uzerka, which is another weird location in Saqqara at the beginning of the 5th dynasty. If you look into details, you find out that the transition of the 4th and 5th dynasty was quite a complicated one. Uzerka is Irimat, whereby Snofru is Nebmat. And we know that the legitimacy was during this period at stake. So I can't avoid thinking of Uzerka defining his legitimacy by putting the center of his pyramid on the line created by these 2 points, which is the center of the Lord of Mard and Shepseskaf, who was probably a very important member of his family. So by accomplishing this line by the 3rd point, he manifested explicitly that he belongs to a specific line in the family. And like this, you can explain, at least, you can attempt to explain some of the facts. Another line that is quite tempting, and again, I can't go into details, but there are historical arguments supporting this hypothesis, is the Uzerkaf in Saqqara, Khufu pyramid, and New Saras temple connection, because these people were in one or another way associated with the solar card and basically belong to the most important promoters of the solar cult, as indicated by specific entities all over Abusir, Abu Ghurab, or Saqqara, or Giza. Again, we can't go into detail. Czech mission is quite famous for discovery of Abusir papyri in different locations all over Abusir. So nowadays we have several archives, most of them, basically all of them, published. So we all know that their individual mortuary facilities played a very important economic role in the economy of Memphis, of the mortuary cults, and obviously these installations employed a huge number of officials that tended to grow as the time proceeded towards the end of the Old Kingdom. So economic aspects of these facilities is a very important feature when talking about local geography or landscape or political or economic landscape. Sometimes the intrasite analysis shows very important social features. It's the cemetery, the pyramid part of the Abusir cemetery itself. I mentioned already the well-known Heliopolis alignment of most of the Abusir pyramids. Sometimes lines can indicate internal arrangement of individual archaeological entities within the area examined, and sometimes they lead to nowhere. Like this red line, it's completely out of question, despite the fact that sometimes it's been discussed. So, as I said, you have to be very careful when playing with alignments. Sometimes it works well, sometimes not, and sometimes it can be just a chance. Coming to the mid-5th dynasty and to South Abusir, Niusera is one of the kings that illustrate very well the punctuated equilibria of the ancient Egyptian history, because during his time everything has changed. We have evolution of new types of tombs that demonstrate very specific social status of their owners. As we know, the highest officials of the state start to usurp more and more royal regalia, royal monopolies. One of the earliest was the Vizier Ptahshepses, whose mastaba was excavated by our institute in the 60s. At the same time, another explanation of the same trend are the family tombs of a low status officials, but still, or high-ranking officials like in South Abusir. Our latest discoveries, including Princess Sheretnepti, AS-31, quite a famous solar mastaba, AS-39, belonging to chief physician of Upper and Lower Egypt, Shepseskafan, discovered only recently. And all these people, like members of the family buried here, belong to a single extended family, intended to build tombs in a cluster. So cluster building is another feature that can influence quite significantly local topography. Religious aspects. We all know from textbooks that niching was a dominating feature of non-royal mastabas from the 1st through the 3rd dynasty, and we always expect them to be on the east front of the mastabas. If you move around in a specific geographical environment, you can come across exceptions that confirm the rule. One of them is the late 3rd, early 4th mastaba of Hetepi, which is over here, about 300–400 meters north of the pyramid complex of Djoser. This is another view of the entity from the west, looking over Lake of Wadi Abusiri towards North Saqqara Plateau. North is on the left. And this mastaba, because it was orientated towards the Lake of Abusir, got niching only on the north side. And why? The explanation is very simple, because most visitors were coming from the north. So what was most important was the northern facade, not the eastern one. So here we can see how the local topography can influence the setup of individual objects excavated in the field. More to it, there are two, this is a very strange combination typical for transitional tombs that occur only during the 3rd dynasty, which combine two different approaches how to set up access to the underground rooms of the mastaba. They combine a flight of steps and a shaft, which is over here. In this particular case, again, we are staying with the mastaba of Hetepi. We have this flight of steps that is twisting several times as you proceed to the south, to the shaft here, and always you leave or you enter from the west. Again, it's beyond the scope of this small talk, but first of all, we don't have any parallel to such an entrance or exit setup in non-royal environment for the 3rd millennium BC, and you can see that archaeology, as Toja also said, can be full of surprises. Here we have some close-up of the southern flight of steps and the shaft over here. The entrance or the exit, and the combination of the end of the steps and the shaft over here, leading to the burial chamber of Hetepi. And the niching of the mastaba of the north, on the north facade. That's where we stopped the excavation many years ago. Talking about religious aspects, it's also important to include in the study the titles. If you don't understand titles and social setup of the society, you lose a lot. One small example is the tomb of Kaaper from the early 5th dynasty. Maybe you remember, maybe not. He was, among other things, also priest of the goddess Heket, which is quite a weird title because Heket was a frog goddess. And if you look at statistics of occurrence of the priest of Heket, you can see that during the Old Kingdom, most of them, with perhaps one exception, which is a Wepem Nefret from the early 4th dynasty, which is from the period when they moved from Abusir and Saqara to Giza. All of them are located in the north or central Saqqara or south Abusir. So again, you have a reference of the frog goddess to the lake. We know from our trenches that were interpreted by geologists that the Lake of Abusir was a seasonal body of water. And seasonal ponds or lakes have one particular feature, namely that the frogs can survive in them for months when there is no water. And when the water comes in during the Nile flood, at the beginning of the Nile flood, they kind of rejuvenate out of nothing. At least for the Egyptians, it was a rejuvenation or regeneration out of nothing. And that's why we have the priests of Heket mostly associated with funerary cults. Only in the area of Abusir and Saqara. So there is a direct link between a title and a specific geographical setup. Now we are approaching the end. This is the famous, I said, solar mastaba. I said it on purpose. It's a mastaba dating to the mid-5th dynasty, perhaps to the time of Nusera. We still lack the name of the owner. One of the particular features is that the corridor opening from the east and which leads directly to the chapel that was found completely damaged is orientated 31 degrees to the south, to the southeast from the east. So this orientation is very difficult to explain. It's very unusual again in the third millennium context, but sometimes when we managed to open the site very early in the morning, we could see that the sun was reaching to the westernmost parts of the chapel early in the morning. So we can't exclude now that people at this period, particular period of Nusera, or maybe post-Nusera, experimented or were allowed to experiment with such features that are otherwise unattested for the 3rd millennium BC. And here an obvious example from the Lake of Abusir. This is all what survived from the mastaba of AS31 in terms of decoration. We know that he was, among other things, also priest of Khnum. And north of his mastaba, we found a small cult place, I dare to say, featuring 2 plastic heads resembling heads of a ram. So we can't exclude also that in the near future we will be able to come across a specific cultic, temple-like, shrine-like installation set up directly in the Old Kingdom cemetery. And these are the last 3 pictures. I come to the microcosm. In many cases, we excavate mastabas. We wonder at marvelous decoration, architecture, the degree of preservation of individual architectural features, and sometimes we come across things that are really difficult to comprehend. This is a mastaba of Inti dating to the 1st half of the 6th dynasty. Again, mastaba discovered in South Abusir, featuring such weird features. We had an entrance from the west, open court, cult courtyard, a niche with the false door. So far, so good. And then it comes. We have an entrance, preserved entrance, connecting this open courtyard with a principal shaft leading to the burial chamber of Inti. We have a niche which is difficult to discern now in the western wall. And the serdab to the west of it, which is connected by means of a narrow slot with the chapel. If you go down the shaft, at the bottom you can see a typical burial chamber with a limestone, probably tura, by origin a sarcophagus robbed, of course. In front of it, something again very weird for the 6th dynasty, a 3-dimensional false door stela to the east of the sarcophagus. So if you try at least hypothetically to make some interpretation of these very weird features, as I said, the entrance, connecting shaft, and the open cult court, the niche, serdab, the slot, etc., the false door at the bottom, you can hypothetically say that this is how you can track down a ghost, a soul of the deceased, moving around in the mastaba, because we know that according to prevailing concept, the tomb was the house of the soul. And this is, to my knowledge, again, archaeologically, at least archaeologically for the first time, that you can reconstruct the movement of the soul, ascending from the burial chamber, leaving the sarcophagus by means of the false door, entering the serdab, taking part in the cult ceremonies in the chapel, and leaving again by this entrance back to the shaft, or the other way around, according to your personal preferences. So these were just a small windows into our archaeological work that we can provide. Sometimes conclusions, interpretations are hypothetical, but I think that at least one thing is quite obvious, that in terms of landscapes, you can play with different sorts of evidence. You can focus on different aspects according to the topography, geomorphology, the granularity. What decides is the granulation of your perspective, and sometimes it can add quite interesting arguments to the prevailing paradigm that we all tend to venerate in Old Kingdom archaeology. Thank you very much.